listening off and on to the Reverend Dr. Bob Schuler's Hour of Power broadcast, which was from the Crystal Cathedral in Anaheim, California. Now, how many of you are familiar with Bob Schuler and the Hour of Power? Okay. And in those days, coming out of a more literalist theological background, I took a lot of issue with what seemed to be what I would call easy Christianity by Dr. Schuler. Although his take on positive thinking was very appealing to me, I always had the sense that in his core theology, it was just filled with kind of a cream puff filling sort of thing. Where was the damnation? Where was the accountability and the acceptance that can only come through Jesus the way that the Bible teaches? Then I found a biography of Dr. Schuler. Do you know that Dr. Schuler, in his early years of his ministry, was a hellfire and damnation preacher? Dr. Schuler was he was a member of the Reformed Church of America, which is fairly conservative. The same denomination, however, that also was the denomination of the Reverend Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, the original positive thinker pastor. Now, Schuler had been assigned in his coming out of seminary to become a new church startup in Southern California, where he became known as the church that was the drive-in chapel. So people, this was very innovative in his early years, to go to a drive-in to listen and be a part of church on a Sunday morning service. So he struggled on this. He only had really just a little more than 100 cars, families that were there kind of supporting that ministry. So he had the bright idea of one Sunday of inviting Reverend Dr. Norman Vincent Peale to come and speak. Now, Norman Vincent Peale had been a pastor for a long time from the Marble Collegiate Church, which is in Midtown Manhattan. And it just so happens, now I realize I am not the most outstanding speaker, but I went to Manhattan in New York City and did a class on preaching. And that preaching class actually was in that church that Norman Vincent Peale had pastored for like 30 some odd years. Just one of those little experiences in life where I got to stand where someone of such power and of such grace presented the word and love of God. Anyhow, so Dr. Peale, with Schuler inviting Peale, he recalls his thinking, oh goody, now these miserable sinners are going to get their what-fors when Dr. Peale comes and speaks to them. Now, the drive-in theater was packed. There was not an open space for one more car to fit in. And as Dr. Peale began his sermon, he began it with this statement: Jesus never condemned anyone, and he doesn't condemn you. Schuler just about fell out of his chair. Totally believing that Peale was wrong, Schuler spent the rest of that morning's sermon looking through his Bible to prove text Peale was wrong. And he realized that he couldn't find any place in the New Testament Gospels where Jesus condemned anybody. Peale was correct. Outside of condemning the behavior of those synagogue leaders who had gone awry, Jesus never condemned anyone. Schuler had two revelations that day. That was the first one. His second revelation was he realized that people needed encouragement to help them get through their week. and that the one place that this could happen was a church. And it was at this point Schuller shifted into the power of positive thinking through Christ's teaching and actions, truly realizing the words of Jesus when Jesus said, and I'm going to paraphrase, "I have not come for the healthy, but as a physician to heal the sick." So if Jesus never condemned anybody, why do so many churches of today do so much condemnation in the name of God? Honestly. Worse yet, why does the church support its condemnation of so many people with the use of John 3:16 to support that proclamation of condemnation? How does damning somebody reconcile with the concept of love, which is the predominant message throughout all of our scripture? So I want to share with you a particular translation of this morning's text, because I think it will help us have a fresh look at what John is trying to get across to us in his writing. And in verse 17, the Voice translation says, here's the point. God didn't send his Son into the world to judge it. Instead, he is here to rescue the world headed towards certain destruction. This may not sound like much of a difference from the way that you've learned that verse, but the point is, there is no condemnation, but rather a focus on rescue. Jesus wasn't in the business of condemning people to hell. In today's story, we have a man, Nicodemus, coming to Jesus for the questions about how to be better, how to have that better relationship with God. And Jesus talks about belief, saying, then all those who believe in him will experience everlasting life. I believe the church in general has misunderstood what Jesus was saying. After becoming legitimized by the Roman Emperor Constantine in the 4th century, the church, in its newfound power, began using fear and condemnation as a way of gathering members and of controlling the general population by interpreting a specific belief that if you do not say the magical phrase about believing in Jesus Christ, then you would end up burning in hell for eternity. What might Jesus have been trying to say to us about believing? Theologian Marcus Borg writes in his book, The God We Never Knew, about what it means to believe. Rather than strict intellectual assent to propositions and claims, meaning laws and creeds, he speaks of belief as trust, as faithfulness, and in a very general sense, the belief that there's something to all of this. Borg says faith that believes God is not something that we simply will on our own get. We are led into it. It grows. It's not a requirement that we are to meet, but rather a quality that grows as our relationships with God deepen. But we do have to take that first step, he says, and then another step. So there it is. Belief is your response to the mystery of grace. Most of all, who among us hasn't yearned to know that all of this, our lives, our worlds, with both our struggles and our hopes, springs from love? The same verse that has been used by some to judge us is actually reassuring us about where all of this comes from. A God who loves the world, not the church, but the world, so much that only God's own beloved Son was a good enough gift to us. In this type of exploration and explanation, that is in the book that we studied a couple of years ago, The Shack, and in the movie. It was a fictional story, and is, about a father who was a Christian, who never really could buy into what he had learned in church about God. Then, after the brutal murder of his youngest daughter, becomes totally lost in life and was dying in his grief. Through a near-death experience himself, he has in this story the opportunity to meet with God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit and understand what he had been missing his entire life. That God is about relationship and love without condemnation. That's a hard concept for many of us who have been raised to think otherwise. As Marcus Borg would say, the idea of being born again is an understanding of spiritual growth that emphasizes relationship and experience rather than doctrine and dogma. Jesus is speaking to Nicodemus of a new life marked by freedom, by joy, by peace and love. In this second week of Lent, let us all continue to be reborn again and to grow in that freedom, the joy, the peace, and the love that comes from a non-condemning God. For God did not send his Son into the world to judge the world. He came to rescue all of us through love. Amen.